Breadbox Media programming is brought to you by Jack Kane Ford. Find your next Ford Tough vehicle at caneford.com. Woodhill Community Center. Have a hand in the heart of the city. Support their mission with your donations at woodhillcommunitycenter.org. Toyota in Nicholasville Superstore. Online consultants are standing by right now to help you find your next Toyota. Visit toyotaonnicholasville.com. Lexus of Lexington, home of the best-selling Lexus IS. Find yours today at lexusoflexington.com. Introducing the redesigned CatholicSingles.com, featuring new ways that put the spotlight on the person and their faith, not just a profile picture. For the past 20 years, faithful Catholics have used CatholicSingles.com, and the reimagined CatholicSingles.com website is ready to help single Catholics take the next step in sharing meaningful relationships with other faithful Catholics. Remember, CatholicSingles.com for faith, fellowship, and love.
Well, hey, friends, and welcome back to another episode of Lisa, Hendey, and Friends. We have been on the road, and I'm just back from an amazing whirlwind trip to Dallas, Texas, where I had the great good fortune of bringing you what will be the content for this week's show. This comes from my outing to attend the red carpet premiere of the brand new movie, Unbroken, Path to Redemption. This movie is filled with so much insight. It's a beautiful, very poignant story of faith and conversion and redemption and reconciliation and forgiveness. And I'm so happy today to have several little snippets from interviews that I conducted with members of the cast and crew. Before we play those, though, let's take a listen to the trailer for Unbroken, Path to Redemption.
Bless you, Louis. Welcome home. All of Torrance was praying for your safe return.
Miracles didn't save me, Padre. A couple of atomic bombs did that.
You're Louis Zamperini, aren't you? Thank you.
For what?
For preserving the free world for silly girls like me.
People from all over the country want to know if you're going to run in the London Olympics.
What's this?
If you're going to train for London, you have to do it right. Just go nice and easy, see if you can make it all the way around.
You think you can run a 4.7 mile again?
I wouldn't be doing this if I didn't.
I don't run to run. I run to win. You will never escape me. Wherever you go, I will find you.
Are you sleeping well? You're having any night sweats or nightmares?
I just thought I'd be able to forget everything.
I want to go home.
There is no home.
Why is God silent while good men suffer? Why doesn't he stop the pestilence? Why doesn't he stop the wars?
You need help.
Here tonight, there's a drowning man. Just looking for some type of hope for the future. But there's a lifeline. Just reach out.
These men did terrible things to you. What are you going to say to them?
Well, it's definitely not necessary to have seen the first installation of Unbroken to get a lot out of this movie. And I thought it would be fun to share a variety of different conversations with you. To save my poor editor's stress levels, what I'm going to do is share segments from 4 different sets of interviews that I conducted. And I'll just give you a little brief overview before we dive into those of what you're going to hear in each of those segments. So, these were conducted again in a pool interview setting. So what you're going to hear is actually lots of voices, mine being among them, and lots of different people responding to questions. Before we go into that, let me read you the synopsis of this film just to kind of set the tone for it a little bit. Haunted by nightmares of his horrific experiences, World War II hero Louis Zamperini meets Cynthia Applewhite, a young woman who becomes his wife. Zamperini's personal demons soon threaten to destroy his marriage until he hears the stirring words of the Reverend Billy Graham in 1949. Embracing his newfound Christian faith, Louis starts to turn his life around by learning to forgive his former oppressors and spreading the message of peace and love. All the more beautiful because this is actually a true story. And among the people that I met this week was actually Luke Zamperini, the son of Louis, who continues to do the good work that his father began through the Louis Zamperini Foundation. Let's run through what you're going to hear in these segments. First and foremost, I have to share part of the conversation that I had with the Reverend Will Graham. Will, of course, is the grandson of Reverend Billy Graham, who plays a pinnacle part in Louis Zamperini's story. And in that part of our conversation, you're going to hear Will talking about his first time being on a movie set, which was to star in a film, and just his memories of his grandfather's boldness and how that comes across in his preaching in this film, and what it means to him to play this role where he recaptures one of the very pivotal moments in his grandfather's ministry profession. In the next segment, you'll be hearing from some of the producers of the film. Actually, no, we're going to go next to the producer and the director of the film, who will discuss with us kind of some of the challenges of making a story like this, which was done on a lot lower budget. And talking about specifically how you find the right actors to tell a story like this. So they'll let us know how they discovered the very talented Samuel Hunt, who plays Louis Zamperini, and also Merritt Patterson, who plays his wife, Cynthia. So that'll be the next segment. Then after that, we're going to turn to the executive producers, who actually are always very fascinating for me to talk to. I love hearing about all the behind the scenes parts of movie making, and they discuss production, budgeting, efficiency, and kind of some comparisons to this film versus the first film. And then in the last segment, we have a really fun conversation with actually a public school, high school teacher who teaches world geography. And Mrs. Fuller actually uses the curriculum related to the book Unbroken to teach her students about this era in history and these parts of the world. So you'll hear not only from this teacher, but also from her students as well. So let's tune in and listen to this little quick recap of my adventures and learning more about Unbroken, Path to Redemption.
So thank you guys.
Congratulations. What was it like to portray this historic moment in your family's history?
It was extremely special. And I remember sitting there back in California when we were filming, and I remember thinking to myself, I'm preaching a sermon that probably hasn't been heard since 1949, and I'm preaching it right down the road, about 20 miles down the road. And it was a sermon that my granddad probably never preached again, because the entitled was, "Why Does God Allow Communism?" So when's the last time you heard a sermon like that before, And so that was the sermon that we believed that Louis would come to know Christ on. And so that's what we gave to Laura Hillenbrand when she wrote her book. We thought it was this sermon this night. And so that's what we used as the script. So when I'm preaching there, I'm actually using my granddad's sermon from 1940. Oh, thank you. From 1949. And so I think it's I get a little bit emotional preaching it. And I loved it. I was nervous, not because of the preaching, but because I was on a movie set. And I'd never seen a movie set, never experienced a movie set, so I was a fish out of water when it came to that. But Matt and Harold, who you just talked to, they did a great job calming me down, making me feel all right. And I was trying to memorize all my lines, you know, and do it right, because they had a lady named Nancy checking your script, and boy, I didn't want her jumping on me and, you know, correcting me. She had to a couple of times, but she was great to work with as well. But it was a great privilege, and not just to play my granddaddy, but to be in the story of Louis Zamperini. That's the big story, how God changed his life. And for me to actually, Will Graham, to have a small part in it by playing my granddad, that was awesome to play about the story, to complete the story of Louis Zamperini.
In playing this role, is there anything you learned about your grandfather that you didn't know?
There's a few things, and I'm not sure if I learned it or just more of an emphasis on it. And that was the urgency. I mean, he preached like Jesus is coming back tomorrow, or you're going to be dead tomorrow. You know, like, you better make this decision now. And so there's a sense of urgency, you know, like commanding people. And that was the other thing. You know, he was commanding. He wasn't saying, hey, this may be a good idea if you want to come on down, we'll pray. No, he was commanding, because he believed that he was God's servant, God's prophet. In a sense, he was the preacher, and he represented the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords, and he was saying, come, you know, in the name of Christ, you come. And so he was commanding people, and so he was bold too. I remember in that same time frame, he went down and he was trying to get some sleep down in, I think, South Carolina or Georgia or something like that, or Alabama or something. He was down in the South somewhere, and he couldn't get any sleep because there was a party going on in the same hotel. You know, they didn't have Residence Inns or, you know, all these other fancy hotels. They were more mom and pops, and there was someone having a big old party down the hallway. So he put his robe on and marched down there and knocked on the door. Now, my granddaddy's 6'4". He's a tall man. And so he's 29 years old, knocks on this person's door, and they open the door, and a big group of people in there. And they all look at this man in the bathrobe, you know. And my granddad said, I want to address the people in this room. And they said, okay. I mean, that's how bold he is, right? Total strangers. He said, some of you should be ashamed of the way that you're acting tonight. Your pastors would be ashamed of you right now. Some of you are, you know, you're in the church, and you know you shouldn't be acting like this, but you are anyway. And all of a sudden someone said, you're right. I'm a deacon. You're right. I'm a Sunday school teacher. And it just kept it like confession time, you know. He walked away. Never heard another peep from him. But that's right. And that's the example of the boldness he had. And when he preached in 1949, it was sheer boldness. And he stuck to the Word of God. He had made a decision the month before, which was probably one of the most critical decisions he'll ever make. We're actually doing a documentary on it by the BGA on that. It's called Canvas Cathedral. We're going to be putting it out the same time as the movie. And it's a documentary documenting the most important decision of Billy Graham's life, outside of giving his life to Jesus Christ, besides marrying my grandmother. But here was the decision to trust in God's Word. And he had to make a decision to trust God's Word. And so we got a little thing on the Canvas Cathedral, and that's where Louis came in over. And there's parts about Louis in there, and two other famous people that would give their life to Christ, because Louis wasn't the only one. And so it's a neat piece. I don't want to spoil it, but it's going to be a great piece too that talks about some of those things I've learned.
Will, I think there's some confusion over whether you were impersonating your grandfather or whether you were just...
Yeah, I was not.
What were you doing?
I was not impersonating my grandfather. Harold would not let me, and Matt said to do it, and the producer said one thing, the director said one thing. I did what the director told me, and he said when I try to imitate my granddaddy, which I think I do a pretty good job. I'm biased, but bias can be right. I can sound like my granddaddy, and they didn't want that. They said just be natural. Just be yourself. And so I preach like myself. Now, a lot of people say, man, you sound just like your granddaddy. And that's because we're from North Carolina. We grew up very close to, the same neck of the woods. And so we're going to come across, sounding very similar. Our mannerisms are going to be somewhat similar too. But when it came to the movie, I wasn't preaching Billy Graham. I was trying to be like myself. And there's sometimes, I'll be honest, there's a phrase or something that will come out, and unfortunately, I've done it so many times, I'll end up maybe trying to say it like him. It's almost become second nature to me. So I didn't try. I'm not saying it didn't always work, but I was definitely trying to be myself.
So are you looking forward to a new career?
I have my new career. It better be at work tomorrow, you know. No, I'm grateful for the opportunity. I don't want to be a movie star. I don't want to go into the movie business. God's called me to something bigger, and that's to tell people about Jesus Christ. And can movies do that? Yes. But God's given me a platform to preach the gospel, like crusade-style evangelism, interviews, one-on-ones. God's given me an opportunity to do that, and that's what He wants me to do. So I'm going to do what God's called me to do. And I appreciate this opportunity. And I really did enjoy it. It was nerve-wracking, but I look back as one of the greatest experiences. I mean, think of how many people want to be in a movie, and I got to be in one. I have a small part at the very end, but I got to be in one. Most people want that, and it was not something I was looking for, but God gave it to me anyway. That's why God gives you things far greater than you could ever imagine, and I'm so grateful for that.
Was there always the desire to make this film? Of course, Unbroken was made, and a lot of people saw it and saw the ending and thought, where's the next chapter? So was it always your intention to make this next film?
Yeah, it's obviously going to be the most common question. And so the reality of the situation was that I first started working on this in 1998. And it was based on a CBS documentary that was made about Lou Zamperini's life. And so I took that to Universal. Ironically, in 1956, Universal had bought the rights to Lou Zamperini's life in a book that he had written called Devil at My Heels, where Tony Curtis was going to play Lou Zamperini. So there was already a legal chain of title to Universal all these years later. So we went back and redid Lou's deal as a consultant. And so the project was essentially reborn based on the CBS documentary. Same story, which is something that I talk about all the time. One of the amazing aspects of Unbroken as a property is that it's the same story that it was in 1949, except we're in 2018, and it still has a remarkable resonance to it. And all that we've had to do is be able to try and tell that story effectively. The problem was, from the beginning of this story, long before Unbroken existed, was that on a film level, films have various act structures that you have to abide by. And more importantly, no studio is going to make the 3-hour version of Unbroken, because the scope of what it is that it takes, major studios don't make 3-hour versions of movies anymore. The best example that I can think of that Universal made in 1978 was The Deer Hunter, which is that The Deer Hunter had a 3-hour length, and the 3 hours were spent, number one, in Pittsburgh before the war, hour 2 was in Vietnam, and hour 3 was coming back to Pittsburgh. But you can't do that. No studio, and the movie was going to be as expensive as it is. And the largest structural problem was that because Lou had such an amazing experience as a child, then as a teenager, then in war, then at sea, then in a prison camp, you can't get to the prison camp without knowing who the man was before he got to the prison camp. And so every time in the drafts where we tried to tell the full story, it felt like the movie was starting over again. And there wasn't any way around that obstacle. And so and most importantly, since Lou had placed his trust in me as the producer of his story, Lou was okay and understood that it was too much to make into one film. And so as long as I had Lou's blessing on it, then I was okay with it. And he understood the very problems that would have plagued the project in 1956. The desire was if Unbroken was successful enough, we'd be able to get another crack at the apple, another bite at the apple, and to try and do the story with justice that it deserves. And most specifically, to get his conversion on screen in a way that has meaning, and the same logistics apply. If you are not dramatizing how Lou got to the conversion at the end of the movie, then the conversion has no meaning. And most importantly, there wouldn't have been a way in one film to have Cynthia. There's no such thing as a movie where the female romantic interest comes in 2 hours and 20 minutes into the movie. So all of those issues plagued me from day one. But what was I going to do? It's either, okay, well, you're going to try and cram everything in, and most importantly for the faith-based audience, the last thing that I wanted to do is to make a movie where people would say, hey, why did you do that? Why did you give it short shrift? Right? Because so there was constant feedback, and I joke about this with Will Graham now, which is that Franklin Graham was on television when the movie came out saying, yeah, they didn't tell the rest half of the story, and I wanted to reach through the television and say, hey, Franklin, I'm aware of the issue. But in looking at that, I know in seeing the film now that absolutely the right choice was made. Because to have given that short shrift, it would have gotten just as much, why didn't you include it? And the response would have been, boy, you certainly didn't do that right. Right? So now it lives in as a whole piece. And so that's the answer to the question.
I think that his struggle in the camps was just crazy. I can't, unbelievable. I mean, I remember watching the first film, and it was hard to watch, and it just went from bad to worse, and from worse to terrible. And to see somebody go through that sort of torment and torture, who at the end of the day finds his redemption at a Billy Graham tent revival, is just miraculous. And I think it's just proof that God's got a plan for our lives, and sometimes those plans are going to be rough, and there's going to be challenges. But as long as you can keep your hope alive, there's always hope.
Speaking of the tent revival, I got to be there that night when we were filming. It was so cool, and I had a chance to meet Samuel. And actually, they gave me my one-on-one as he was walking to the men's room. I said, walk with it. I said, really? Seriously? You can't even have a break? But
you didn't go inside, did you?
Such a hard work. I stopped.
Okay.
Outside the door, yeah.
It was about a 10-minute walk to get there.
He struck me as someone who was working so diligently to get it right. Can you say a little bit about working with him and also working with Merritt and what it took to draw particularly his performance on it?
Sure. Matt and I had talked about the importance of finding the right actors to play these roles, because any hint of false pretense or any hint of acting in these roles, and they would have just fell short, and it wouldn't have done justice to who Lou and Cynthia were. And Sam, when he came in for his audition, he brought in his sides to the sheet that we give them that has a few lines, and I noticed that there was basically no clean area on the paper. And so we went through his audition, and I said, hey, can I see your sides? And it kind of freaked him out a little bit. He's like, sure. So I walked around the table, and he had put so much thought and research into every line of that side of what emotions, what cues. And I just read it, and I'm like, this is a committed actor who's committed to the craft, who really understands what's at stake in playing this character. And we brought him in for his callback, and we had found Merritt at that point, and we teamed him up with Merritt, and they just clicked instantly. And there was just a consensus on our side of the table, before he even left the room. It was, we knew we had found Louie and Cynthia.
There's been a lot of talk, of course, on Will Graham in the role that he carries. Was there a acting crash course or any kind of coaching direction that you were giving him?
Yeah, it was a crash course. It was go watch your grandfather's sermons and see what you think. And in the audition, when he first came and met with Matt, and I wasn't even auditioning, we just invited him in to talk to him, and he read a little bit of his grandpa's sermons, and Matt immediately, when he left, said, my goodness, he sounds exactly like his grandfather. And there was some magic in there. And we commend Will, because what a courageous choice to come into a project like this with no acting experience. Certainly experienced preaching and preaching in front of a group of people, but portraying another character is a completely different ball game. And he came in with a heart of gold and threw his entire will into this, and did a fantastic job for us.
Yeah, I can't speak highly enough about anybody, and I've worked with a lot of actors in Hollywood, among the best, and I can't tell you how much I admire Will. It takes a lot. You got to be brave to be able to say, okay, I'm going to play a really well-known guy who just so happens to be my grandfather, and I can't remember 3 lines in doing these announcements, let alone 3 pages of dialogue, right, that he came into. What was, I had spent 17 years seeing, well, at that time it was 17 years of looking at the Billy Graham 1949 revival footage, right? So I had every line in my head about what that was, and then to be in the room with Will and hearing it was, well, I mean, there was no choice. I mean, we didn't see anybody else but Will, because and then now post his grandfather's passing, I think it's such a beautiful memory for the entire Graham family to have. And we showed the film to Will's family last week and in North Carolina, and it was just a fantastic evening. And it was Gigi Graham who had said that she knew that her father would love the movie and be so proud of his grandson. And so I think that it lends a beautiful touch to the film, and he's good in the movie. And so that when you are looking at where the end of the film goes, I think it's compelling cinema, in large part due to his direction, but Will pulls it off.
Yeah, I think when you talk about acting and you talk about truth being conveyed by the actors, and I think that Will was so connected to his grandfather's words that there was never a hint that it would be anything but that, and he believed everything that he was saying, and I think that was a big help to him and his performance, and he really got into it when he stepped in front of our extras in the tent. He was in the moment, he was present, and
they applauded the first day. The first take that Will did, everybody, all the extras applauded. It was fantastic.
And so, yeah, just incredibly courageous. And I think Matt and I have a new friend for life. Will is, if you ever get the chance to sit one-on-one with him, you just know he's an incredible man, and very blessed to have him as part of this project.
Yeah.
Sure. So, I mean, it's been discussed, the production budget versus what the original film had, but you have such a broad scope of production of locations and the costuming and the vehicles and everything. So, talk a little bit about how you pulled that off and with such great effect in this film.
Mike and I were wardrobe leads.
Did you do the hair?
It's all animation. Glenn was the audio guy.
Right.
You know what? It was, I'm going to give tremendous props to a couple of folks. The director, Matt Baer, pulled a lot of favors from his relationships from the first film. And Patty, that works at Universal, who works with them.
Patty Jackson.
What was that?
Patty Jackson.
Yeah, Patty Jackson. Patty is, they just did a great job of making the most of what they had. And, some of that with Matt just comes from years of experience. He knows how to dig deep and pull the best out of what he's got. So, but part of it too was it was, in the first film you're crashing airplanes and you're on the ocean for 2 weeks and you've got these exotic locations. This didn't require that kind of budget. It was much more of a narrative. You're following a couple of people in their lives. You're in their home. It just didn't require it, So, but those three deserve a lot of credit. Anything else you'd pull with that?
Well, there were challenges. I mean, it's a period piece. So you have hairstyles that are difficult, makeup, you have to find the right locations, the clothing. Where we were very lucky is that we were able to shoot in Los Angeles. And in Los Angeles, you have the prop houses and you have the costume houses, and it's all there. If we had shot in South Africa, if we had shot in Canada, it would have been more difficult. But there was a little bit of magic here in that Los Angeles gave us some tax breaks. They looked at the film, they said we want it shot in LA. He's a local hero, he's a Torrance kid. So we were able to shoot in LA. Usually on a budget like this, you can't. And when you shoot in LA, you have access to the best hairdressers and the best costume houses and the best makeup artists. But you also had a lot of people that really wanted to work on this movie. And they really pushed themselves hard to do the best they could on the budget we had. We had our cast and crew screening in Los Angeles last night. They were so proud. They were so proud of what they did. So I think it was a combination of all of that. My wife used to be a costumer. She did the Golden Girls for the whole 7-year run. She said, I sat there trying to find a flaw in the costumes, and I couldn't. And she said, for this budget, how did you do it? And that's part of the magic here. Just a lot of people really wanted to do this project and do it right.
I'll speak to the Matt Baer and Harold Cron. They didn't have a lot of days to shoot this movie, just right around 20, a little over that. And I think that the efficiency that they were able to achieve and really choosing the moments correctly, the takes, not having to do a lot, they did an absolutely incredible job to get the type of production value they achieved, the camera movement, the shots, the locations. They were extremely efficient, and I think that comes across in the film and makes it look bigger than it would normally feel on a much bigger scope. And so all of those things I think played together, and it was an incredible crew.
All the cast. Sorry. Go ahead. All the cast and most of the crew has changed. Was there an effort to have certain through lines that were retaining kind of the feel or the intent of the first story as well?
Yes. But this is really the second half of a story, where the first half was about his time in the camps and the struggles he went through there. And by the way, he had to have a lot of inner strength and faith there as well to put up with what he put up with. But this was a very different story. And even though you wanted to have some relationship back, which we did through, the newspapers at the beginning, which we did a little bit by showing him in the raft, a little bit by showing, the plane shooting down at them. We really wanted to tell the second half of this story, which to us was the story that needed to be told this time, was about his coming back, his PTSD, him falling, to alcoholism, his family life falling apart, finding his faith, the support of his family, and how that changed his life. So there were two very different stories, and we had to be careful of that we didn't cross too much and get them confused. But this is the story that needed to be told. This is an important part of this story.
I understand that much like the first movie, this script for both these projects were in development for quite a long time. I mean, the first movie was decades. The script floated around Hollywood. My question is, why do you think it took so long for Louis' story to be brought forth? And now we're seeing 2 movies in a 5-year span about Louis, but for so long, his story didn't get made. Why is now the right time?
That's a great question. I alluded to it early on with the fact that if you told the whole story in one movie, it's Gone with the Wind, right? There was not an intentional leaving off of the faith part of this story in this film. You couldn't take an audience through all that they went through and then take them through yet his other PTSD journey. His journey home was too much. So it was important for that to get told the right way, as Glenn alluded to. So the development in the script process is about getting that right, and as Glenn has said before, staying true to Laura's source material in the book is so important because she's the one who did all the research. She's the one who spent years reading through the newspaper articles and watching the reels, listening to interviews with Lou. She had it right. So it just takes a while to mix good narrative with entertainment on the screen. You got to get that right. And I think Richard Friedenberg, who wrote the first draft of the script, he was nominated for an Oscar for River Runs Through It. So the guy's an incredible storyteller, and I think did a good job of building the foundation of this new script.
All right, so why are we here today?
Okay. All right, so we're here today because of a curriculum unit that we've done in class. I've done it since the young adult version of Unbroken came out, and it actually started the conversation with my mom. She was telling me everything that was happening in the book, and I told her, just let me read it. Let me find out for myself. And so, of course, moms are always right, and I read it, and it was amazing. And I thought, I could really integrate this into world geography. And there was a knowledge gap. When I would say World War II, they would know about the Nazis, they would know about the European theater, but they had little to no knowledge of Pacific theater. Maybe they knew Pearl Harbor occurred, but they didn't quite connect it. And so I felt like this could fill a gap. And so the first year I started it, I approached my administrator and Mr. Holmgreen, and he was on board with it, and so was curriculum. And we implemented it, and the first day I knew I was onto something because we started reading a book in a class that was an English class, and that's a hard sell sometimes to teenagers, and they loved it. When the bell rang, there was an audible groan across the class, and it was just kind of amazing to see they just identified with this character. And so as it's progressed with the years, they had their own story to tell, and I felt like Louis was that guide for them to feel comfortable telling their story. And that's how we're here today, all because of my mom's book suggestion.
So what is it about Louis Zamperini and his story that you believe is so compelling for a group of high school students?
I think it comes down to character and grit and the idea that you can have hope even in the most daunting situation. I also think, to me, the scope of a life is something that's honorable to look at. You get to see his whole entire life from beginning to end, and to know that you never have to say, today's the day I give up. You can always have hope in the future. You can always make a change, but it comes down to you and what your choice is. And I think that's what Louis personifies, is this idea that you can have scars, but you can remain unbroken, and you can persevere even in the toughest of situations.
So, on what you were saying is how this relates to high school kids. Sometimes high school kids, you feel alone, you feel adrift at sea, and that's what Louis was. Is he was there. He was with those two friends. He was with somebody that he could relate to, and sometimes that's all we need. Sometimes we think, no, we need the whole school to be with us. We need every single friend that we can. That's not what's important. What's important is those two guys that keep him going. Those two guys that are there for him. And I think that's something that's really underestimated.
Another element that I found was very useful was the fact that we weren't just learning curriculum. This book taught us morals, and it taught us life lessons more than just reading a textbook. Rather than just learning where different countries in Europe might be, we would learn how to deal with our own struggles, how to look internally and become better people through just a simple book. But that book really has helped us all personally.
Have you all seen the film yet?
Yes.
No?
The first one.
The first one, not this one. So the transition between, I mean, some people will say the book is always better than the movie, and I'll be curious to hear from you afterwards, but how is it to actually take something that you've read, a story that you've read, and then see it portrayed on a screen? How does the book impact you differently than a film does?
I think the book did a great job at letting you kind of visualize it yourself. It's kind of whatever you see, that's kind of what the book was. And so then, you go to the movie and you kind of compare what was in your head and then what was on the screen, and you just kind of see the difference. And I think, again, like you said, the book was a lot better than the movie because it was just so much, whatever it was, I got to see that. I got to keep that in here. And I didn't know what the outcome was. I didn't know what the answer was, but I knew in my mind, I knew what it was.
And I think especially with reading a book, you can stop and take a moment to realize how it can affect you and how you can relate it to your life. When you're watching a movie, it keeps on going and you go from one part to the next. When you're reading a book, you can stop and you can take a moment, you can go back and read it again, and you understand it more and you connect with it more when you're just reading it on a paper.
Yeah, like going off what she said, I realized that in the book I got the chance to just like pause and think like, oh, I can understand where he's coming from and I can kind of like relate to it even though my story isn't exactly the same. It just gave me a second to process and like put into perspective whatever I was going through. But like with the movie, it was just fast paced and it was just entertainment. But with the book, it was like a chance to like come to realizations.
Yeah, I actually totally agree. I'm a person who loves movies, and I think they're the best thing ever. They give actually, but with this book, reading it and listening and just imagining in my head what he went through, you don't need a movie. You can see it by reading it, honestly. It was actually the best book I've ever read, honestly. Mm-hmm.
And I hear that echoed throughout the years is that they say, I've never actually finished a book, or this is my favorite book, or this is my favorite story. And so that just keeps the power going, because it's built up in the classes to come. And so they'll come by, as former students and say, have you started the book yet? No, not yet. And so they build up this hype. But when we watch the first film in class and it ends and it just cuts to the montage, there was almost a riot. And they felt like, no, we have to see the struggle. We have to see the PTSD, we have to see the alcoholism, we need to see him come full circle. And for them, that's what it meant for them to see that triumph, that he came out on top, and that wasn't in that first film. And so for them, we've talked in class quite frequently about how men and women now leave the war, but the war doesn't leave them. And so for them, they wanted to see that in actuality. And so that's why we're really excited for the film tonight, because it's kind of closure for all of us to see that story come full circle.
Well, a special shout out and thanks to editor Alex for his work in helping us to pull this all together, and to Breadbox Media again for your wonderful support in providing the way for me to do shows like this. I certainly couldn't do it myself. If I had to do all the editing, it would be a very long time before you got this. So thanks, producer Alex, excuse me. And while I'm saying thank you, make sure that you head over to Breadbox Media to check out tons of great podcasts. Honestly, every time I check in there, there's something new. So definitely check it out. And big thanks to Pete Socks for the invitation to be a part of that family. And I want to thank in a special way my guests on this week's podcast. Those include Will Graham, as Billy Graham, of course, in the film, and director Harold Kronk, producer Matthew Baer. I'd like to thank Ms. Heather Fuller, that wonderful teacher, and the students from her class who shared their perspectives on this film. I'd also like to thank executive producer Bill Reeves from WTA Group, Michael Scott, executive producer and CEO of PureFlix, Glenn Ross, executive vice president of Universal 1440 Entertainment. What a treat to meet with these talented people and to learn more about this amazing story. So we'll have links in the show notes for the curriculum and more information about the foundation, and of course ways that you can get a hold of tickets for Unbroken Path to Redemption. It opens very soon, and I encourage encourage you to definitely get out and to see this for yourselves. It's going to be just an amazing gift to you on your spiritual walk. I think you'll be challenged by the film. There are some moments of great emotion, but I also believe that the tremendous message of inspiration is one that will give you hope and will encourage you in your own faith journey. Well, that's it for this week's show, and I do wish you and yours all the best. Have an excellent time this week, and until next time, God bless.
Thank you for listening to Breadbox Media. Find more about us at breadboxmedia.com.